I'm in the big leagues, told them don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh, send it through quickly. I'm making his dog, like I'm in the big leagues. Told him that I gotta go, dog. I'm riding the road, y'all. I think that I'm back in my bag now. So I need that go, y'all. Got hits when he throwing the fastball. Just too quick for it, peeling off like the whip orange. Seen they effort, this piss poor, I got too much.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Another Turnover, the basketball podcast where a basketball fan with zero basketball credibility gives his opinions on what's going on in the NBA. Opinions that nobody asked for. As always, I am your host, Mr. Chris Aaron Murphy, aka Aaron. And ladies and gentlemen, let's just jump right into it. Folks, the time has arrived. Can you believe we are already done with the NBA regular season? 82 games full of excitement, and twists and turns, and storylines, and drama. The Lakers. And how crazy is it that we are done with the long NBA regular season? Well, you know what that means. We are now in playoff mode. It is time for the NBA playoffs. So this episode you're hearing, posting on Friday per usual, but the playoffs start tomorrow. They start April 16th. I cannot believe it already. We are already in the playoffs for this 2022 NBA season. But it has been a fun season. It's been a full season of a full NBA season of Another Turnover. I can't believe it. It won't be long before I'm talking about season 3. But we'll let season 3 talk about season 3 when season 3 comes. But let's get into today's show. Today's show will be all about a little playoffs preview. So let's get into some of the matchups. Let's get into, who I think is going to win. I'm going to talk about these first round matchups that are coming up. So let's start in my favorite conference. Let's start in the Western Conference. So let's go ahead and take a look. Now, before we get into the Western Conference, so today when you're listening to this, Friday, there are 2 more play-in games for the final spots in the Western Conference and in the Eastern Conference. So in the Western Conference, you have the Los Angeles Clippers taking on the New Orleans Pelicans, who broke my heart the other day when they beat the Spurs. But that's okay. It's okay. I didn't get my hopes up. Like a wise person once said in a very famous movie recently, expect disappointment and you won't get disappointed. So we have the Clippers and the Pelicans taking on each other for the final playoff spot in the Western Conference. In the Eastern Conference, you have the Atlanta Hawks going up to Cleveland to take on the Cavaliers for the final playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. So both of those games take place tonight. So whenever you're listening to this, watch some play-in basketball. The previous play-in games by Minnesota and who was it? Yeah, Minnesota and the Clippers was excellent. Not so much the Eastern Conference side, but watch some play-in games. It should be fun. But let's get into the preview of the playoffs coming up. So, in the Western Conference, you have the number one seed pretty much all year, for about 90% of the year, the Phoenix Suns. They will be taking on the winner of the New Orleans Pelicans versus the Los Angeles Clippers. And so for this series, it's not much of a stretch at all. I think the Phoenix Suns, whoever they end up facing, whether it be the Pelicans or the Clippers, will be moving on to the second round. If they play the Pelicans, unfortunately, I'm sorry, CJ and Brandon Ingram, I think you're getting swept. I think the Pelicans are just too much, the Suns would be too much for the Pelicans. Now, if the Clippers win that play-in game, I could see the Clippers making the Suns sweat a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, no Kawhi Leonard. I think the Suns beat the Clippers in 5. But that being the case, I think it would be, here are those series that were, you may have had a sweep or, a 4-1, but those games were pretty close. Kind of similar to how the Golden State and Cleveland finals matchups were when they won 4-0, 4-1. Most of those games were pretty close. But I could see Phoenix Suns beating them 4-1 in very close contested games. But like I said, Phoenix is better than both of those teams pretty much in all facets of the game. Offensively, they're better. Defensively, they're better, etc. Like, they are just better all around than the Clippers and the Pelicans. If you look at the starting 5, 4 of the starting 5 for the Phoenix Suns, you have Devin Booker, who has had an MVP caliber season. Like, hats off to him. He's not going to win MVP, but he should respectfully be in the conversation. CP3, aka the point god, like, had a phenomenal season, was out for a significant portion towards the end with the, was it wrist injury? I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. But he has played phenomenal as well with this team. I mean, it's just, you know, the growth and the maturity that he has helped nurture in this Phoenix Suns team cannot be understated. DeAndre Ayton, who is deadly in the pick and roll, playing in a contract year, has had a pretty good year overall. I know he's looking for that max deal. I don't know if Phoenix is going to give it to him. That's a story for another day. But with an incredibly high ceiling. Mikal Bridges, defensively, I mean, in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, like one of the perimeter lockdown defenders in the NBA. Also a candidate maybe for Most Improved. I mean, I know I want my boy DeJounte Murray to end up winning that award. But hey, Mikal Bridges respectfully is in the conversation for Most Improved Player of the Year. So 4 out of their starting 5 is, you know, are incredible. Like, the Phoenix Suns should definitely end up winning this matchup. Like I said, I've got them beating the New Orleans Pelicans either 4-0 or the Los Angeles Clippers 4-1. But let's take a look at the next series. You have the Dallas Mavericks taking on the Utah Jazz. That is your 4-5 matchup. I'm going to go ahead and say that Dallas wins this one in a close one. I think this goes 7. I think this goes 7 because this will be the first year, I believe, that Luka Doncic gets out of the first round. I mean, if you remember the last 2 seasons, he's lost to the Los Angeles Clippers both times. Put in a phenomenal showing in both series. I mean, putting a hurt on the Clippers. But with the new pieces that Dallas has, namely Spencer Dinwiddie, I definitely believe that could put them over the hump. Spencer Dinwiddie is definitely an upgrade over Kristaps Porzingis, who they shipped to Washington in that trade for Spencer Dinwiddie. So, and y'all know how I feel about the Utah Jazz. If you've watched the show all year, I'm just not very high on them. Like, they're a great team in the regular season. But when it comes to playoff performance, they're not it. I'm sorry. I just don't see much from them. It should be a good series. I mean, I have it going 7, so obviously I have the Utah Jazz winning at least 3 games if it's going 7. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Utah ended up pulling it out. You know, they've got some solid pieces. I just don't see them as a championship caliber team. And if they do end up losing in this series, I definitely think that Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell pairing, it may be the last time we see them in the same jersey together. So, but we'll see. I could be wrong. That's just pure speculation, but I've got Dallas beating Utah in that first round in a close 4-3 7-game series. So let's move on. The next series we have is the number 3 seeded Golden State Warriors taking on the Denver Nuggets. I believe this will also be a close one, and Golden State will end up winning this 4-3 in another 7-game series. Now, the injury to Steph Curry changes everything about this series. No Steph Curry or a hobbled, 50% Steph Curry could definitely spell for an early exit for the Golden State Warriors. Now, Jokic is pretty much going to have his way with this Golden State team. I mean, historically, he has not been, put off by their throwing different matchups at him. He basically does whatever he wants against that Golden State defense. So they're going to have to come up with some kind of way to contain him, to limit him from his playmaking ability, from his scoring, just basically doing whatever they can. It's a lot easier said than done, but the Denver Nuggets, if they're going to have a chance, their others are definitely going to have to step up and get him some significant help. Obviously, there's still no Jamal Murray. There's still no Michael Porter Jr., so that's a lot to ask for Nikola Jokic, and they don't want a first-round exit either. I mean, they made it to the conference finals against the Lakers in the bubble playoffs a couple of years ago, so they don't want a first-round exit either. They have tasted playoff success, but I think what will help prevail Golden State is their championship pedigree. I mean, if Steph, Klay, and Draymond are all playing, it's really hard to bet against those 3 guys at their peak, when they're playing at the highest level, I should say. So I think their championship pedigree will prevail them to victory. more than likely, there's a lot of talk Steph could be ready to go for game 1. That remains to be seen, but I will be picking the Golden State Warriors to win this series in 7 games. But next series and final series of the first round will be the Memphis Grizzlies taking on the number 7 seeded Minnesota Timberwolves. Now this one should be pretty quick. I've got Memphis winning this one 4-1. No disrespect to the Timberwolves, all disrespect to Patrick Beverley. But I don't think this series will be super close. I think the Grizzlies are miles and miles better than the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now don't get me wrong, Karl-Anthony Towns, solid. Anthony Edwards, solid. But I don't see them matching up well when it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, the only thing why I picked Memphis to win in 5 instead of a sweep, what could do them in Memphis is they are young. They have a very young team. You know, young teams, especially in the playoffs, are prone to making mistakes. And if it comes down to a stretch of a close game, there could be a mistake that happens that ends up, costing them a game. Hey, it's a 7-game series. It could happen. But the Memphis Grizzlies, like I said, are just pretty much better in every single way. Ultimately, I think Memphis will end up being too much offensively and defensively for the Minnesota Timberwolves to handle. It'll be too much for Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards to overcome. So I've got the Memphis Grizzlies beating the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round in 7 games. But let's go on over to the Eastern Conference. Let's go take a look at the matchups in the first round for the Eastern Conference. So let's start at the top of the bracket again with the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, the Miami Heat, taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Atlanta Hawks. So that is the last play-in game to determine the last spot for the playoffs. Now, I have Miami beating either one of these teams. Let me just get that out the way. But if it's Cleveland, they'll probably beat them 4-1. That's my guess. If it's Atlanta, I think it's going 7. And let me tell you why. Now, Miami does seem primed for another run to the finals. I mean, they have most of the core intact from the 2020 playoffs in the bubble. They've still got Bam Adebayo, they've still got Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero pretty much has 6 man of the year locked up. They added Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, PJ Tucker. Like, they've got a squad. Don't get me wrong, they've got a really good squad, but their late struggles were really ugly. I mean, the spat with Eric Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler, which I'm sure has probably been worked out by now, at least I would think. But they've had their late struggles, which kind of raised some eyebrows with this Miami Heat team. They're still solid all around, especially defensively, and they have incredible tenacity and grit to their team. Definitely reminds me of the old Memphis Grizzlies team with Zach Randolph and Tony Allen and those boys. But if Cleveland wins, I don't think it'll be that close. I think it'll be 4-1. But if Atlanta wins, I think Atlanta and Trae Young and John Collins and Herter and Bogdanovich could give them fits when it comes to the offensive end. Atlanta can score a lot of points, and sometimes Miami has shown that they can't do the same. Now defensively, like I said, they're solid, but it could be pretty interesting. Now we often forget. How soon we forget in the sports world, right? Who made the Eastern Conference Finals last year? Oh yeah, that'd be the Atlanta Hawks. Now, they beat the Knicks, they beat the Sixers, ended up losing to, obviously, the Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals, but Atlanta's been there before. Now, and obviously, the Miami Heat has made it to the championship here recently, like I said, 2 years ago, but if that ends up being a first-round matchup, I think that's going to be a lot closer than people think. But ultimately, still got the Miami Heat advancing past the first round. The next matchup is the number 4 seeded 76ers taking on the number 5 seeded Toronto Raptors. I've got Philadelphia winning this one 4-2. Now, the series could be interesting. I think it could get kind of interesting, mainly because there are so many unknowns when it comes to James Harden. Like, is he hurt? I mean, is he already disgruntled in Philly? I mean, he just got there, but he's asked for a trade from his last 2 teams before this. I mean, is he, does he not want to defer to Joel Embiid? Like, what's going on? Y'all remember a couple weeks back or a month or so ago when the trade was made at the deadline, a couple months ago now, when the trade was made at the deadline and Philly had won like 3 of their first 4 games or whatever it was, or like 3 in a row. If people were like, oh man, Philly's got the championship on lock. The East is theirs. Like, and I was like, everybody chill out. Like, I need to see more from this Philadelphia 76ers team. And boy, did we see more. Like, we saw more of what Philly fans probably hasn't wanted to see. James Harden has not been the James Harden that we know, the James Harden that they traded for. So that is a big and massive variable with that team. Now, Embiid probably is going to win MVP. He's not my pick. I mean, y'all know Jokic is my pick because I talked about it a couple weeks ago. But on the Raptors' part, it's definitely going to take a team effort to contain him, to keep him from doing whatever he wants down on the low block. And he can obviously stretch your defense as well. Now, Toronto, give him some credit. Toronto is well coached. For them to get to the 5th seed with no legitimate all-stars, pretty impressive. Nick Nurse is a heck of a coach, and they have solid team chemistry, led by Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam. Scotty Barnes has played pretty well. I want to say OG Anunoby is still on the team. I could be wrong about that. I haven't watched a whole lot of Raptors games this year, but they're pretty solid still. I do see them winning a couple games in this series. If Philadelphia is not careful, it could even go 7. I wouldn't even be surprised by that. But I think ultimately too much Joel Embiid for this Raptors team, and I think they'll end up winning, the Sixers that is, 4-2. Let's take a look at the next series. The next series you have is the Milwaukee Bucks taking on the Chicago Bulls. I don't think this one's going to be very close, unfortunately, for the Bulls. This is probably going to be a gentleman's sweep. I'm saying 4-1. Unfortunately for Chicago, they had a pretty solid season, and injuries kind of derailed it, which really, really sucks. I mean, Lonzo Ball's been out majority of the year. Alex Caruso was out for an extended period of time. Zach LaVine has had his fair share of injuries. DeMar DeRozan has mostly been in the lineup, but been injured here and there. But unfortunately for Chicago, this was probably the worst matchup that they could have got in the first round. The Bucks, I think the Bucks are going to roll them. I mean, they are better pretty much in every way, offensively and defensively. Their big three, I think, ultimately will be too much for the Chicago Bulls to handle. Respect to DeMar DeRozan. If it gets down to a close game and he's got the ball in his hands, he has been known to be a big shot maker for the Chicago Bulls team specifically. What do you have, like 2, game-winning buzzer beaters back-to-back early in the regular season? But unfortunately for the Chicago Bulls, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Like, you're getting sent home pretty early, so don't pack too many clothes. But the last series that we've got in the Eastern Conference, we have the 2-seeded Boston Celtics, my favorite Eastern Conference team. This will be the team that I'll be rooting for. Unfortunately, what I'm about to say, taking on the 7th-seeded Brooklyn Nets. Now, as much as it pains me to say this, what I was just alluding to just a second ago, I've got the Brooklyn Nets winning this series in 7 games. And like I said, it pains me to say, but this will probably be the most interesting series of round 1. This is not really a 2 versus a 7. When the Nets were healthy, everybody was playing. That was James Harden and Kevin Durant. Obviously, Kyrie couldn't play at the time. They were the number 1 seed before Kevin Durant went down with his significant injury. They were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. I want to go ahead and pick Boston in this series, and they very well could win. If it's going 7, it's basically a coin toss, like whoever wins that game 7. I want to pick Boston, but the loss of Robert Williams for them, I think, is going to be massive. It has massive implications for the rest of this series. Robert Williams for them is kind of how Draymond Green is for the Golden State Warriors. Obviously not their best player, but plays a huge role in what they do offensively and defensively. I mean, Robert Williams is their defensive anchor, their rim protector, their guy in the pick and roll, catches lobs, does the dirty work with rebounding on the offensive and defensive glass. Robert Williams was a big piece for them, and I definitely think that, unfortunately, that is going to show its ugly head in this series. Brooklyn is not great defensively, don't get me wrong, but this should be an offensive masterpiece when it comes to a series of both of these teams. I mean, Tatum has already dropped, over 50 against the Brooklyn Nets. Shoot, a lot of people have dropped that many points, but Kyrie and Kevin Durant, that's going to be a lot for Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart to contain. If it comes down to a 7-game series, Game 7 in Boston, I have a hard time picking against Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving when they're both healthy with those kind of stakes on the line. So I am, like I said, unfortunately, going to have to pick the Brooklyn Nets to win this series. But Boston, I'm still pulling for you. I know I didn't pick you, and I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Like Tupac said, it's just the way it is. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is the preview show for the NBA playoffs. Some pretty exciting matchups. Only one upset I'm predicting. I'm predicting all the higher seeds to make it out of the first round, except for the Boston Celtics. But I hope I'm wrong on that one. I hope I'm wrong. But that is all the show I have for you fine folks today. If you are listening, if you can do all the good things, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, do the same. Follow the channel on all the socials at Another Turnover, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or wherever you get your Another Turnover news updates. But playoff starts this weekend. Like I said, should be fun. I hope you are going to watch. I know I'm going to be watching as much as I can. But with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Cannot wait to talk to you next week for a playoff recap. And I will see you later.
Seen they effort, this piss poor. I got too much I gotta tend to. Car payments and the rent due. Told y'all that I'm 6 foot, but with the money stabbing, I'm 10 to. Too much that I've been through, so I put it all in that rear view. Clean money in a black whip. Got old problems with the friends new. Yeah, I'm in the big leagues. Told her don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. Yeah, I need a bag, bruh. Send it through quickly.